I'm Tom Ahern. Welcome to my world of birds. I've been a professional wood carver for over 50 years now. And as I do shows, people ask me questions like, what kind of wood do you use? How do you get the detail in the feathers? And I've even had a woman ask me if I took a real bird bills and stick them on my pieces to make them look real. Well, I'm going to do this something different, something I've never tried before. We're going to put together a three-section video of carving, painting, and burning, and it's going to show the different stages on how to do it. This bird is a cedar waxwing. It's the bird I chose to use for the demonstration for the carving video that we made. It's a bird that's fairly difficult to paint because of the shading. One shade runs into another. You don't have very many colors, one on top of another. And that's one of the things that I want to show you as we go along. Welcome to part one of the video showing how a cedar waxwing is made. This part deals with the carving. We'll go through the shaping and detail carving of this unique bird. When I carve a bird like this, I usually have the grain going in the direction of the feathers. But what's going to happen is it's going to go across the top knot here and across the bill. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut two pieces. The grain is going in this direction on this piece, and the grain is going in this direction on this piece. So I have the grain going in the direction of the bill and the top knot. And that'll be make it a lot more sturdy. What I'm going to do now is to trace the pattern onto the basswood that I'm working on here. I prefer basswood because I think it carves very well. I prefer air dried to kiln dried because I think the knives travel through the wood a lot faster and easier when it's air dried. So what I'm going to do is to trace this and make a tick mark on either side where I'm going to make my cut. Now, I'm going to take the head and I'm going to have the grain going from the top knot to the bill and make a tick mark where that's going to be cut. And I'll take a straight edge and mark that. Now we're ready to cut. Okay, so this is the tool that I'm going to be using to flatten this area here between the head and the body. As you notice, I left a little bit of extra there. I didn't cut it all the way to the line. What I'm going to do is to turn the sander on and sand that down from the bird and the head, and then we'll put it on like that. I want to show you the nice fine surface that I've got there now. When I put that, when I glue that on, there will be no air in between the pieces, and it's going to make that nice and strong, and when you cut around it, you won't see the glue line. The glue that I'm using here is Titebond 3. It's a wood glue. It's waterproof to a point, I would imagine, but it's a good glue and it holds very well. Now I'm going to take this and spread the glue around the joint to make sure that both surfaces have plenty of glue. Then what I'm going to do is to turn that head, press it on. Now, I must be careful to give myself enough wood. See, that isn't going to give me enough wood there, so what I have to do is push that back a little bit. And I've got to be able to get the circular look of the neck. Okay, we're ready to go. That bird has to sit overnight now, and then we're going to be ready to shape it tomorrow. What I'm going to do now is to run a line right down the center of the bird. Now this has set overnight, and it's time now to do some shaping. And I'm going to do that with a sanding disc. And I want to get the general shape of the bird here. Okay, so now this is coming off, this is coming off, this is coming off here, and then we're going to get the shape, we're going to get a top profile, and I'm going to do that with the sander. And then I'm going to start to round, and then we'll shape the bird. This is a sanding system that I've developed over the years. This is a 24 grit sandpaper that I have on a rubber disc. And I put it into a drill chuck like this. And that travels at 2,400 RPMs. I'm going to turn that on and I'm going to shape as I go. Now, there's going to be a lot of noise here because I need to turn the dust collector on, and then we're going to turn that on. So, cut. Okay, I'm going to show you now. That's a little on the rough side. So what I'm going to do is to take this disc off that I put on, and I'm going to go to a 120 grit disc. And I'll be able to make my sanding a lot finer. Cut. The next step in shaping, I'm going to take hand tools and start to do some of the shaping. But first I want to show you some of the things that I use. I use these knives from Woodcraft Supply. I've been using them for over 30, 40 years. And these Swiss-made tools, I use different tools. This is a gouge. You can see the curve on the tool there. This is a parting tool. It has a V shape to it. I'll be using that quite a bit. And this little fishtail here, I'll be using this to get in between the feathers and on the back area, and I'll show you that a little bit later. Now I'm going to start with this knife, and I'm going to start shaping the bill. The idea is to get the extra wood off so that the bird starts to take shape. and I'll be working on the head here, and then I'll get to work on the body. The body is pretty much where it needs to be. Now, if you notice, these two blades are different shape. This one here is a bit wider. This one is more narrow. What I'm going to do with this one, I'll work on the outside shape of the bird. But when I use the smaller tool, that way I can cut a curve like this. Now, I've left this area raised up here. The primary tail feathers are going to be carved into that. They'll be carved right into the piece of wood because I don't use inserts. I'll be carving them right out of the back of the bird here. Now, if you notice on the pattern, the wing is prominent from here all the way back. So what I have to do when I shape this is to create a general flow so that it looks natural coming back this way. And that's what I'm working on now. I'll usually let the tail a bit thicker than I really need. That way I won't be taking too much off as I'm working in this area and through here. Once I get these, the primary feathers up and undercut, then I'll bring this down to shape. Now a little bit more shaping on the head here. I want to give myself enough room on the top knot here because as it comes back, it kind of curves down and curves in. So I need to leave myself enough wood to be able to do that. Now, it's important to know the direction of the grain and how it runs. See, as I'm cutting this curve here, I'm starting to dig in because I'm going against the grain on this piece. So now what I need to do is to just gently come around and bring that together. Now, if I have a problem with that, I can just take a gouge and go across like this. And then that takes all those pieces off of there that were starting to splinter. One of the ways that I like to hold my tool is what I'm working with right now. I'll hold it with the blade going away from me, and I'll take this thumb and use it as a fulcrum. And it gives you a lot more stability, and you're able to really do finer detail that way. Okay, that bird is ready to sand, and it's ready to start to do my feather carving. So we'll go to the sander. Now we're going back to the disc sander, but this time I'm not going to be using a disc. I'm going to be using a Sandiflex flap wheel sander. There are little brushes here, sandpaper on this side. This is 100 grit sandpaper, and this will follow the contour of the bird when it sands. Go. Whoops. Once in a while that happens. And there is the shape of the bird, all ready to do my feather carving. Now I'm ready to draw the feathers on the bird. What I'm going to do is use the pattern that I've drawn for the feather definition. And the first thing I'm going to do is define where that wing is going to be. Now I need to find the center of the bird. There's the center line, and I will start here with that wing. And on the other side, equal distance from the center line, I'll start the wing from on the other side. And now we check to make sure that this one I think is a little low. I'm going to raise that just a touch. I find myself always adjusting. I'm able to see what needs to be done, and if you take the time to make a change as you're going, it really helps on the final product. If I see that something isn't quite going right, I'll change it somehow to make it work. See, now there's the primary feathers. The tertials will come back in through here, and then these will come up that way. Now, the back feathers will be in this area. not necessarily defined, because the cedar waxwing is a unique bird. There aren't very many colors on top of colors. What you have is a lot of blending. One color just blends right into the next, all the way up the bird here. So we'll be showing you that as we get into the painting. So now what I want to do is to define the wing. And I'm going to take this this parting tool. Now this is a number 12 parting tool. It's a V shape. And I'm going to be cutting a V to define the wing. Next step is to relieve what I've just done. The wing is going to be over the top of the body, so that what I'm going to do now is to reduce the body underneath the wing so it looks like the wing is standing out. Now this upper part of the wing, I'm going to put a little bit of a curve on it. I'll relieve the edge, but I don't want to do that down any farther because I'm going to be carving feathers down in through here. Now I'm going to lay in the secondary feathers, or the secondary coverts. And these coverts also. Now I start with the primaries. I'll duplicate that on the other side here. Now that feather pattern is a little bit wide. What I'm going to do is to narrow it down a little bit that way. Okay, now my next step is to relieve this area back in through here. And this is going to stand those primary feathers up above the bird. This is another parting tool that I'm using. It's a little bit smaller than the one I was using before. Now I'll take that little fishtail gouge and start to work away the center area here. And this is one of the reasons why I let extra wood on the tail, because look, see, I went too far there and took a little bit off of that. So you want to leave certain areas of wood. If you're going to be roughing and using a lot of effort, it's better to let some pieces until you start working on the fine detail. Now I'm going to back cut, and we're going to pop that out of there. Now I can clean this area and taper it from here down to where it meets the tail. Okay, clean that up just a touch. Now, I don't want to undercut these primaries yet. Eventually what I'm going to be doing, after I get the detail carved in those, I'm going to be cutting a V groove in here so that it looks like it's raised up above. I'm going to be taking this wood out of here, but I don't want to do that until I get all my feathers carved, because I might need to lower that a little bit, and if I do, and if you have taper on there, it makes the feathers smaller as they go in. So that's one thing you don't want to do. Do the upper area first, and then you undercut. I'll clean this up a little bit more, and then I'll start my feather carving. Start up with your uppermost feather first. The back area here, you don't see individual feathers. What you see is the tips of the feathers. They're like this. So instead of like that. So what you're seeing is just the tips of the feathers. So it looks like just fuzz. Now from here on down, the feathers are more defined and they're harder and they're more substantial. So what I'm going to be doing is carving from this area on back. And then we'll put the detail in this upper part here with a burning tool. So what I'm doing, I'm making a cut around the edge of the feather, down maybe, a little bit less than 1/16 of an inch. And then I'll lay my tool flat and undercut, or I should say back cut to that point. Now you don't want to get your knife underneath the previous feather, because when you burn the feathers, you burn deeper than it goes below the surface, and it could break away the edge of the feather, and you don't want to do that. And one of the secrets to carving like this is to have a really good, sharp tool. That way you can get some nice, crisp feather detail. And when I was teaching, I always used to tell my students, clean as you go. If you have a little fuzz right there and you say, I'll get it later, and you do the rest of the bird, there will be other fuzzes that will be on there, and you go to clean those and you never get them all. So the thing is, to each feather that you carve, make sure that it's nice and clean after you get finished with it. And another thing, don't worry about cutting your drawing detail off. See what I'm doing now? I'm cutting where I drew the little side feathers here. Don't worry about losing those feathers. You can always draw them back in. Get the ones that you're working on looking good, and then you go on from there. So now I'll draw these back in. And you start with the innermost feather. Okay, cut. Over the years, I've tried to develop ways of doing things that gives me the highest rate of efficiency. I don't want to do spend any more time on something that is absolutely necessary. So I've worked on ways to give me better results time-wise. Now that grouping is done. Now I can start on the tertials in the back here. Back many years ago when I was a lot younger, I used to do all hand carving. Even the roughing out of large birds, I'd do it by hand. And I started to have a problem with my shoulder and went to the orthopedic surgeon, and he told me that I was wearing out my rotator cuff by that intense carving that I was doing. That's when I devised this sanding disc that I use to do the roughing with. So I don't do any more roughing, heavy-duty roughing by hand anymore, but I still stuck with the hand carving for the detail work. I don't use any rotary tools. I have some, but I just never could get used to using them because I started carving close to 60 years ago. And at that time, there were no rotary tools, and I got used to doing it my way, and I just couldn't break away from that. This is a number 2 gouge. It has just a little bit of a sweep to it, and I make sure that it sharpens straight across. And that way, after I got the feather started with the knife, I can go along the side edge of it with this tool and make a nice clean cut. Now I have a little special knife that I use sometimes. This is one of my old knives that's been sharpened down over the years. It's good for getting into little spots like this and also for taking out splinters. The kids always used to come to me when they'd get a splinter and, hey, Dad, get your knife out. And that's what I would use to get the splinter taken out. Now we're going to be carving the primary feathers. And I'm going to start right here. These feathers here come down over the primary feathers. So you can see here where they would be underneath this part. So what I have to do is start here and back cut. Okay, there's my first feather. Now I'm going to start back here to do these back in this area. And it's the same thing. You cut around each feather and then back cut, and it creates a shingle effect of one being on top of another. Now, sometimes I don't trust myself to just go ahead and carve. I want to make sure that I don't make a mistake, so I'll redraw that feather. Now that feather there comes underneath and then it comes out here again. So this feather here is part of that. So that's what I'm going to be working on here. And if you work it right, you'll get a continuity look to make it look like it actually belongs. Now, after I make the cut, I will taper this to make it flat. And then the next feather, you'll see it total. I'll start from up here and come right down all the way. That cut. Now this one, I'm going to use the number 2 gouge. Now here's a good example when I say clean as you go. See, there's a little piece stuck in there. I want to clean that out. Now I have a nice sharp crisp line through there. Now I'll finish off this feather. Next feather. Now I'm going to define the under part of that feather a little bit more by doing this. Now see how that's starting to stand out? I'll take another cut. Now see how that's starting to look like it's standing up? And I'll do the same over here on this side. Now that those feathers are carved, I can undercut. Just take a little slice at a time. Now I'll refine that a little bit more when I do this side over here. I'll bring them both together. So, but you can still see about how that's done, how it makes this feather look like it's raised above the body. Now I finished all the carving on the right side of the bird here, the feather carving, and then I took the liberty to do the left side, so we don't have to go through that since it's just a duplicate of what was on the other side there. The next step on this bird is to adjust the height of the tail. I'll get the height where I want it, and then I'll start undercutting the back to thin the tail as we go here. First of all, the tail is a bit narrower than what you see there, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to take my knife and just narrow that. Okay, now I have the width where I want it. Next thing I'm going to do is to start to establish the plane of the tail here. Now I'm going to go from the body to the tail here and create the look of the tail and the width, the height. Okay, I've got that where I want it now. Next step, I'm going to create the body will come into the tail at kind of like an angle here. See, as the body comes down, it's higher in the center here than it is on either side. So what I'm creating now is like a demarcation of the tail feathers and the body. Now I want to use to show you something here. See those two knives? when I work with a knife like this, I want there to be more of a curve on the edge so that I can get into this area here without the tip digging in. So I'll go to the knife with the curved edge. It's a matter of taking a little here, a little there, until you get what you're looking for. Now, I usually leave the edge of the tail about 1/8 of an inch thick. That gives me enough leeway to carve the feathers up in the top here. Now cut. This is something I'd like to show you. The group of feathers that are back here and the group of feathers that are up here are kind of like a clamshell. They close on the tail feathers. So you've got to create that look so that you get a more natural look to it. So what I'm going to do now is draw the feathers. The tip of the tail on the cedar waxwing is more or less straight across. Some birds, or most birds, have a V in the tail. The middle tail feathers are a bit shorter than the others. So that's the curve on the cedar waxwing. I'm going to draw a center line to go by, and I will get the first feather. Now, I'm going to make a statement here. There are no feathers on a bird down the center of the bird. A bird has one feather on this side, it will equally have the same feather on the other side. You'll never see a feather going down the center. So, and then when they molt, sometimes they'll molt the same feathers on either side so it won't destroy their flight patterns. Now, what I'm going to do here now is draw the other feathers. And we're going to start to carve. And here again, have to be careful not to go underneath the feather that you're carving around. Now I'll redraw that feather that I just carved off of there. Where's my, this is what I'm looking for here. Now what I'm going to do is to taper this with this small tool. Okay. Now we'll start the same on the other side. Taper. And we're going to put the last feather in here. Now you can see there, I've carved down quite a bit of that 1/8 inch thickness that I left on there for that. So now I'll have enough space to do the carving on the feathers, on the top feathers. Next thing I'm going to do is to work on the bottom feathers, but I want to show you this. There's always one feather that shows itself on the top, and it's always in the center. But now on the bottom, you have to come around like this, and the upper feathers are on the outside. And we'll draw them in this manner here. And there you have the bottom feathers carved. Cut. Next thing I'm going to do is to shave down the area of the bill here and get that more realistic looking. And then we'll go back to the top knot and work on that. But the bill is number 1. And the first thing I want to do is to get the actual shape of it where it's supposed to be. And then I will carve the detail in it. Now I'm going to start carving the eye pockets here because that all has to be taken into consideration when you're doing the bill. Okay, cut. What I want to do is to sand this area. Since we're going to be putting detail, fine detail in the bill, you have to have a refined piece of wood to do it with. There are carving marks in there now that I have to get out of there so that I can get the detail in that I need to. Okay, now we start. The first thing I'm going to do is to draw the intersection here between the upper and lower mandibles. Oops. Then I'm going to do the upper mandible, and this face comes way down into the bill that way. Oops. And then the lower part comes in, way down in like that, and then up in under the bill. Okay, next step is with a small parting tool that I have here. It's a number 12-2, which is a 12V with a 2mm width. And I'm going to start here and define the bill from the face. Next step is to round this off a bit. And taper this. The next step is to make a cut to separate the upper and lower mandible. The next step is to relieve the lower part of the mandible. To make it look like the upper part is fitting over the under part. See, now coming up into the feathers of the face here, you want a gradual slope, whereas on the bill, you want more of a steeper slope, so that it looks like it's standing up over the feathers of the bill, or the feathers of the head. Next step is to use the finer knife to define the lower mandible. Now the fuzz sticks over the mandible a little bit, so I'm going to back cut the mandible, the lower mandible. But as you get down into the bottom part here, the mandible is up over the feathers. So this is what I'm going to be doing here. So you have a look here. This is over this is over this, and this is over that. So it gives it a natural look then. refining it a little bit, just taking a touch more off the face feathers to define that bill a little bit more. Next step is to put the eyeball in. And we'll drill this later. But the eye placement is critical on the cedar waxwing because of the mask that the cedar waxwing has. Now the mask will come back in this area here, but before I do that, I want to carve the top knot. And that's the next step here. It tapers back to almost a point here. It's round on the top. Now, these feathers here come down like this and curve up just a little bit like that. So what I'm going to do is define that a little bit better than what I have it. Now I want to make a V cut here to thin the edges of that cut that I just made. See, now that gives you a little bit of, when I detail this, I'll be able to make fuzzy edges on that, and you'll see that in a little while here. Now I want to smooth this a bit with the knife to get the carving marks out. I need to thin this a little bit more in here. When you get to the fine detail work, especially in the head and the face area, you take little chips. The farther you go with it, the smaller your chips have to be, because you don't want to take a big chunk out and be sorry for it later. So just a little bit at a time here. Now I have a little piece going against the grain there, so what I'm going to do is cut that off. Rather than trying to get that edge and that plane with the knife, I'll just go across grain with that gouge. Now I want to come up a little bit like this. And I'm going to take the real fine parting tool and do this. Now I will undercut this to make the top not look like it's standing out over it. Now, next thing I'm going to do is to put some marks in here with my parting tool to make it look like those feathers are kind of separating. Okay, now that bird is ready to sand, and we'll be able to start the next stage after we do that. Something I forgot to mention in the past here when I was working on the face, I usually put a texture on the breast because the breast feathers usually are fairly fuzzy looking. And I do that with my hand tools by just doing this. I'm using a number 7 gouge, and that gives me just the right depth that I need to get the texture that I'm looking for. Different gouges will give you different sweeps, and some are deeper than others, but this number 7 is, I found, what I usually use mostly. Now when I'm working with a songbird, a very small bird, I'll go to a smaller gouge, even a number 8. I gotta be careful that I don't nip off any of the carving that I've already done on the wings there. But this will give the bird a fluffy look. As long as you sand them the right way. These marks that I'm putting in here now have to be sanded. And you have to be careful that if you use a heavier sandpaper, what happens is you sand the wood off all around the cut and you end up with a dimple. That's what you don't want. You just want one of these cuts flowing into another. Now here you have to be careful of the direction of the grain. And I'm finding that right now at this spot the grain direction is changing, so I have to turn the bird and go the other way. And by what I mean is changing, if you go to make a cut and it digs in and you have to push much harder, you're going against the grain. And that you don't want to do because you can make a chip that's too large. Now I'm going to taper this a little bit as I go up here and not go as deep. On a cedar waxwing, I don't usually texture the back area because the feathers in the back are really fine and very thin. So you can do that texturing with a wood burning tool. And that's the extent of the texturing that I'm going to be doing. Go. This is an anti-slip rubber mat, and I put the bird on there like that. Need to lower it just a touch. This is a 1/4-inch drill, and I'm able to drill the hole in that manner. So we have 2 eyes, and we're ready to sand. Go. The next step that I'm going to do is the sanding of the breast, where I put those little gouge marks in. This is a contour sander. It has a fine 120 grit, and there's a brush in the back of the sandpaper. The sandpaper has little cuts in it so that it can form around the piece that it's sanding. So I'm going to put that in the chuck now, and we'll do the sanding. Now I've taken off the upper edges of this. Now what I'm going to do with a real fine sandpaper by hand is go around that, and I'll show you here in a minute how that's done. But 400 grit sandpaper, very fine, and what I'm going to be doing is pushing with my thumb one thickness of paper, pushing like this, so that it pushes down into the little indentations. If you use a heavy piece of sandpaper on this and take the top marks off, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of little dimples. That's what you don't want. So you want that paper to go down into those little dimples that are there and just relieve the edge a bit. Now, when that's burnt, The little burn marks are just going to kind of go in and out, and it's going to give it a fluffy look. And once we start the painting, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, cut. Now we're going to set the eyes. I'm going to use a putty. This is Atlas pool putty. I used to use an Atlas epoxy home epoxy putty, and they discontinued it. And I looked all over for it, couldn't find it, and then finally I found this pool putty made by the same outfit, and it's exactly the same putty as I used to use. So what I'm doing now, I've mixed 2 parts, and I put them into the eye sockets and allowed myself a little room for the eye in there. So now the next thing I'm going to do, if you put the eye directly onto that putty, it pulls the putty off as it hardens. So what I've learned to do is to take a punch and put a little piece of paper in there in the eye socket so that the putty does not hit the back of the eye. Now I'm going to put the eye in, and I'm going to use the handle of the pair of pliers there. And now I'm going to take an old nut pick that I've styled into a tool for leveling, and I'm going to run this over the eye. Now the eye is a little bit below, the base of the eye is a little bit below the surface of the wood. So when I put the putty in, the putty is going to hold that eye in. See? And after the bird is burnt, I will put the lid over the eye. I don't do that right away. Oops. Now I want to try to get the eyes at the same depth. I think I've got it there. Now I'll take the putty and bring it around the eye. I usually like to make the hole that I drill for the eye a little bit larger than the eye itself. That way, excuse me, that way I can adjust the eye a little bit by moving it up or down or whatever, so I can get them both at the same spot on either side. So there we are. The eyes are all ready to go.